Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Typhoon Streams. I'm Tyler Springs. Great to be with you. And if you like what we're doing here, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, and anywhere you can find us. Right now, only expand on that a little later on. Follow us. And, just try and keep up. We're going to do a lot of football content and some women's sports content coming up as well. Stay tuned on that. But those will be probably on separate playlists so that but what I want to do today is talk about great action we had in the USFL Conference Championship game between Birmingham and Michigan, and also a whale of a game in the XFL Conference Championship game between St. Louis and San Antonio. Ultimately, it was Birmingham Stallions victorious in comeback fashion in the USFL title game. They will play for their third consecutive spring football title, and it will be the upstart San Antonio Brahmas, who have never been in this game before, beat St. Louis on the road, facing them for the third time this season. Finally got one over on the Caw crew, and it will be Wade Phillips against Skip Holtz in the UFL title game. I want to do a little bit of just debrief from those two contests and look ahead as well at what we're going to get this coming weekend with the Stallions and the Brahmas matching up on Father's Day. For those of you who have not been spring football observers throughout the season, I can tell you that Skip Holt's side has been a force to be reckoned with. You know, there are times when look at that roster and what he and Zach Potter have built. And if you don't know the story of Zach Potter, go and look it up. It's pretty interesting just how he's gotten to be in a position for a professional football team where he's managing all the personnel on a day-to-day basis. He's not yet, I don't think, 25 years old. It's an incredible credit to him for working hard and getting in this position. But talent-wise, Birmingham, I think, has built a roster where every single year you look at them and you'd be like, how did they get this guy? How did they get that guy? And I've said it before. I think one of the best things that Skip Holtz has done is not just go and get great quarterback talent, but it is go and get great defensive line talent, because that, I think, is kind of a pressure release, a valve, if you will, for anything that the quarterbacks feel, because they know they've got a great defense on the other side to go against in practice, but they've also got a great defense taking care of them when they screw up. And there were some screw-ups on Saturday by league MVP Adrian Martinez. He was not the MVP at the time of the game. It has since been announced on Monday, yesterday, that he is the league MVP this year, but he was the presumptive favorite for league MVP. Congrats to him. League-leading rusher and one of the most dynamic passers in the league. We saw it all season long. But in that conference championship game, you know, Birmingham falls behind early, and it's not as though Michigan was doing everything to drive the nails into the coffin. They certainly left some points on the board, but it was shocking in a lot of ways to see Birmingham not executing at the level we're used to seeing them. Used to seeing Martinez be able to scramble, be able to use his feet, and a credit to that Michigan defense, Colin Bauer, Mike Nolan. They certainly put together an incredible unit there that put pressure on him. They were able to get stops in the first half and limit what Birmingham was able to do. I think what you saw also was that Birmingham, having been in positions like this before where everybody's going to take them seriously, everybody's going to take their best shot at the Stallions, they didn't quit. It did, require some changes, some adjustments, certainly, but it ended up being a Birmingham comeback victory in huge fashion. It was a crazy game. I think I said going into that game there were a couple of categories that Birmingham and Michigan would probably win or lose, and those would decide the game. I think for Birmingham, one of the things that I was looking at was, do you win the battle of explosive plays, right? Because in times where I think Michigan has come close to beating them, and they certainly did that more than once this year, probably you could say 2, even 3 times, they won the battle of explosive plays. Ultimately, Birmingham, who had more explosive plays in this one, including a couple for touchdowns. You get that early Cioce Mariner touchdown for Michigan, and then everything after that was a field goal. 18 points you can get to a lot of different ways in the United Football League, but they got there with a touchdown and then field goal, field goal, field goal, field goal. And that is, unfortunately, what a lot of teams have ultimately succumbed to in terms of settling too much, not being able to punch the ball in, and it certainly happened to Michigan Saturday afternoon because they got a little comfortable. I don't know what the breaking point is. right? And maybe Panthers fans would be able to tell me a little bit better than this. I'm not sure what the breaking point is between do we need to go for 6 here in the especially if it's the first half, if there's a lot of time left in the game. Obviously later in the game it makes a bigger difference to get a bigger lead, but getting that early touchdown, they don't get the extra point. If they were able to get a touchdown on even one of those next 3, 4, 5 drives, it would have probably changed a lot of the way the game was played. I think when you settle for field goals that way, you leave yourself open to the other team kind of taking bigger bites than you are and finishing their meal ahead of you, so to speak. And I think that Michigan got caught there a little bit. Obviously, you love being in a road game for them. Love having lead the way they did 18-3, I believe. But it was disappointing, I think, because I saw that, I think, back in week 2. I go back on my Showboats experience. That was what happened in the comeback victory for San Antonio back in week 2 at Memphis, where Memphis was on top, I believe, 16-0 at one point, and then 19-3 in the second half. And that was because they had scored an early touchdown, but had really supplemented that with field goals, and that feels like snacks, not meals. And that's, I think, part of the reason that San Antonio was able to come back and win that game, just biting off bigger chunks, one at a time, but quickly, right, in quick succession. And I think that's partly what Birmingham was capable of doing, because you get 12 points off field goals. If you flip even one of those and you make it, say even a 21-0 or 21-3 lead at that point, I think that changes a little bit of how Birmingham plays things. It is what it is. They Birmingham's defense, I think you got to give a credit to them for holding Michigan to 18 points after giving up a lot of that early in the first half. Nothing doing in the second half at all for the Panthers. Then you go into that wild third quarter, and as an announcer, I feel envious of Drew Carter, but I will say the ESPN or ABC broadcast did a great job. As a sideline reporter, first of all, that is like being I don't even know what you would. I don't want to compare football to war too much. But that's like hearing volleys going off on each side of you, one after another after another. And you have to keep chasing down kind of the source of each one. So a great job to the sideline reporters, Cole Kubelik and Stormy Tony, for going and chasing down all the playmakers in that wild third quarter. I think Drew may have said it, and I certainly said to somebody, this is the drunkest football game and the drunkest quarter of football I've ever watched. I mean, can you conceive of another time where there were 6 turnovers in one quarter, and one of them, importantly, being returned for a Birmingham touchdown? That was crazy. That was truly wild, and some of them were pressure-based, certainly. Others were kind of unforced errors, and that, I think, is ultimately what got Birmingham back into the game. That and the big decision to say, hey, Adrian Martinez is my MVP frontrunner, but when Matt Corral has played this season, played pretty decently, and I'm going to go to him. Go to him, at a time where my team needs. Shout out to Skip Holtz for making that call. Maybe not that tough, Use certainly the resume that Martinez has put together to kind of weigh how long of a leash you can give him. But he, clearly Holtz had seen enough, and you heard it on the sideline, Mike. He had seen enough of Martinez failing to make the plays that were available to him that they decided to turn to Corral. Congratulations to Matt Corral for coming in and helping rallying the team. Touchdowns in that second half that were critical for Birmingham to get the victory, 31-18, and huge work for him, Chase Sternberger, and for the rest of that Birmingham. Back and look at what they were able to do as well in the red zone. Corral gets that one pass to Person, score a touchdown. Birmingham won the red zone. They were even on turnovers, believe it or not, after that fateful third quarter, and it ended up being a 4-4 game. But the explosive plays and the red zone both went Birmingham's way. Mike Nolan's squad falls a little bit short. I think, guys like Danny Etling put together some really good afternoons. I don't know if they're great afternoons, but it was a huge for Birmingham get those comeback touchdowns and to get Corral back in there. So I'm interested to see whether or not Matt Corral is the one who starts the game in the title game against San Antonio next week. I think certainly you'd like to see a little more production if you go back to Martinez and maybe you keep even shorter leash this time, depending on what happens. Interested to see kind of where they go. But it wouldn't shock me at all to see Matt Corral starting with the MVP. This is how it works. People are going to kill the UFL for this. I get that. This is how it works when you have quarterback talent, but not necessarily like quarterback depth and huge drop-offs between one option and the next. I mean, we saw for two teams this season that I think Houston functioned as well, you can argue, with Nolan Henderson, their third quarterback, getting the start in their final game, as they did early in the year when it was Jared Garantano and Reed Sinnett. When you look at the Memphis Showboats, like whether it was Case Cookus or Josh Love or Troy Williams, I think you can make the argument that either Williams or Love were more effective or as effective as Cookus, when those guys were second and third on the depth chart to start the season. So I recognize, that's speaking from a perspective of maybe bad teams. You wouldn't put Manny Wilkins over AJ McCarron, and probably there are a couple other instances where you say, no, this is really the guy. But it is one of those things where you have to let go of the idea that you want to say, well, this MVP in this league is meaningless because if the MVP gets benched in the semifinal game, how good is he really? And the answer is he's really good. He really is. But remember, for these guys, when they want to be the 54th man, quote unquote, and make an NFL roster, the difference between a quarterback who makes it and a quarterback who doesn't is very small. It's very, very small. Birmingham has proved that going out and getting the quarterback talent that they've had. You wouldn't say McCarron and you wouldn't say Luis Perez necessarily are guys that deserve to be replaced. But their backups are also not bad. Like I would love to see a matchup of Manny Wilkins and Lindsey Scott sometime. But I just don't want people to poo-poo the MVP award simply because the MVP gets benched in semifinal play. There is not the talent gap, okay, between Patrick Mahomes and Chad Henne or whoever the backup is in Kansas City, escaping me at the as there is between a Martinez and a Corral, right? They're both there because they want tape, they want to compete. There are a lot of guys on NFL practice squads that maybe are more comfortable staying where they are, hoping they can make the roster at some point and be activated for a few weeks. But if you want tape and you want the job, chances are those guys are equally competitive and similarly talented, and that certainly is the case for Corral and for Martinez. I think I would probably lean toward Corral because I think the frustration level for Martinez has built to a point where it's a little much for Skip Holtz to stomach. I think he would not like to start the way that he started, and certainly you get the chance to turn to Martinez. Things go south in the UFL championship game, so I wouldn't be surprised to see Corral at all to start San Antonio Brahmas. I think the other element is Brahmas have not seen Corral face them, right? And it will be San Antonio and not St. Louis the way I'm sure the UFL was hoping, as so many of us were rooting for that storyline, right? To have Anthony Becht and the Battlehawks hosting a playoff game for the first time in 20 years in St. Louis. Got to feel good to that pro football hungry fan base. I don't know if the attendance in that game was quite as good as it had been earlier in the year, and it certainly will be less so next week. I recognize they cheer for pro football, but most fans cheer for their own team, and having a relationship with the Battlehawks, I don't think probably lends you to go to a game between San Antonio and Birmingham. But I'm hopeful that that game being featured in St. Louis will at least help the attendance there, whatever attendance is worth. And I'm not going to get into an attendance discussion with you, say what it is worth, not worth. That's not where I'm going. I just know it's obviously something that St. Louis wanted, right? They had home field advantage, so to speak, throughout the playoffs. Get it done against San Antonio twice. And boy, oh boy, I tell you, that's an impressive San Antonio team. I said before the game, I think there were a lot of guys for what my view was the league's number one defense who were snubbed from all conference, or I should say all league honors. I think that offensively, that wide receiver core is extremely strong. John Trey Kirkland in particular, I thought was snubbed for getting an offensive player of the year, or I should say, on the all-league team at wide receiver. And the other part of it is, I think, what went underrated about the running backs for San Antonio, who outproduced Jacob Saylors, the all UFL guy for St. Louis in this game, and a tip of the cap to Saylors. He had a pretty decent game, had some good runs, just didn't get enough out of the running game overall, and part of that is falling behind. I think partly what's kept people from realizing how good the backfield is in San Antonio is they've not all been healthy at the same time, so that you haven't gotten to see kind of the punch, counter punch, jab, uppercut, the different moves and the different body blows that the offense can deliver with their running game. And because of people think it's an air raid offense, they say, well, running game, secondary a little bit. Not necessarily. So I've loved watching the combination of both Anthony McFarland and John Lovett, both healthy, both at the same time. You saw them running superbly in this game. And one of the things I had said prior to the game was there were a couple of points that I hammered on in terms of who could win the game. I think my points for San Antonio were don't let Darius Shepard get loose on a big return. I don't think they allowed him to have any returns over 30 yards. Maybe they had one that was a 30-yard return, but he had been the guy who had diced them up on returns. I think 3 times he had 30-plus yard returns on kicks or punts in their meetings during the regular season, and they'd scored every time he had a big return like that because it set them up in such good field position. The other thing I wanted San Antonio to do was convert on their PATs because they had been woeful in that category all season. They had not converted a PAT against St. Louis all season in those previous 2 meetings. They got one, and believe it or not, that one makes a huge difference, right? It comes on the back of that early Justin Smith touchdown, which we'll get to in just a second. But I think because of the way that game plays out, when you get the scoring early, get that rush by Morgan Ellison, by the way, a talented third back, a great guy to have after having huge XFL experience last year. In place of Lovett and McFarland, those guys had been down at different points this year. Because you get that Morgan Ellison rush for 1 point, right? That becomes not just a 6-0 game, it's a 7-0 game early, okay? Then you go for one again with Ellison on the second touchdown. You don't get it. It's 13-0, okay? But 13 is much better than 12 because when you kick a field goal in this league, it's a 9.1 score margin. So kicking a field goal for St. Louis, as they did early in the second quarter, made it 13-3. Had it been 12-3, that's a 1-score game where you can score a touchdown and try to go for 3 to tie up the game. With 13-3, you know it's a 2-score game. You start playing things a little bit differently. Again, nobody scores after that until that big Anthony McFarland touchdown run in the third quarter and that huge sequence of events, Sutherland catch and the Damoy Penu fumble pickup. We'll get to that. But I thought it was huge for San Antonio to just get one version after a touchdown and try and make sure that helps you put the game out. On the other side, for St. Louis, I said they had to do three things they'd done previously was run the ball well. I thought Jacob Saylors actually had some great burst at times. Ended the game with, I think, 14 carries, 79 yards. Wayne Gallman could do nada in this contest. And they tried a couple of different things. Obviously, one of the things they tried was getting the ball in the hands of somebody who wasn't A.J. McCarron running the football. They wanted to protect him a little bit, and they could and they couldn't. Darius Shepard did get one carry. I believe that's what actually the fumble came off of technically. But they were not shy about using some trick plays and some different looks. But ultimately, it ended up being just Saylors and Gallman, and between the two of them, I believe they had just over 90 yards on 19 carries, which is it's fine for this league. It's not awesome. It's certainly not the 35 carries for 213 yards that San Antonio had. And that was one of the things that I had said, that's got to be the prescription for Bruce Gradkowski and Anthony Becht in order to have strong, offensive performance. I said no giveaways in plus territory because you just didn't want to give the ball back with a long field San Antonio because they love to sort of work it down the field. Typically, they are very capable of that, especially, later in games when they have the lead. They will pick you apart 5 yards, 7 yards, and go all the way down with it. But they did not make any turnovers. They did not have any giveaways in plus territory. They did have a giveaway, but not in plus territory. And but the other thing I think I said was explosive plays will get you beat. Now I targeted obviously Jontre Kirkland and Anthony McFarland as the two guys who would be the ones to make plays. I'm half right. McFarland comes up with that huge 63-yard run. We'll get to a couple of a little bit of video here in a second, but I just wanted to shout out the explosive plays that San Antonio made in this game. I thought they were absolutely huge because look at what makes the difference in these kinds of games, and when San Antonio is able to win this year, it is often with them making huge gains, in terms of big plays. So the guys that made the greatest impact, I thought, on this were twofold. One was the lack of Hakeem Butler, especially early, it hurt St. Louis, but also what you got, explosively from San Antonio, on the other side, I thought was really huge. So I'll roll some of this, but I just want people to see, part of what was a real struggle was, Butler just didn't have the kind of game you expect from the offensive player of the year. That's a wide open pass for McCarron. This would have converted their first third down of the game, and extended that drive. Instead, they go 3 and out because Butler just gets a bad case of the Butterfingers. And this is not to be, critical of him, but it is, it's an honest evaluation. Again, when St. Louis has not done some of the explosive plays like this or tried some of the trickery that they tried in this game, and they pulled a lot of different looks, a lot of sleight of hand out of the bag, it's harder to perform in these circumstances, and that in particular, the flip back that was supposed to go to McCarron looms pretty large. That was one of these plays where they try to get the pitch back to McCarron, but Shepard, I think, they ruled that the Tavante Beckett actually forced the fumble on Shepard there, even though it's a hit that comes after he's released it. They basically, I guess, thought that the threat of Beckett there made Shepard nervous. It made him flip it early and high, and McCarron didn't have much of a shot at that. But that's tough. You go back to the explosive plays again. Huge play there, and credit to San Antonio, A.J. Smith and company. They beat both safeties at different times in this contest. The safeties for St. Louis, which had been huge at the back for them this year. It's not just that Chris Payton-Jones got beat a couple of times, and he did, but the potential tackle by Drayvon Askew-Henry over there, you barely see him fly through the picture here. He's so low, and he comes in so fast that he just didn't have time to corral Justin Smith. So I think that the explosive play there for Smith was huge. He had a great game. Again, Butler, 7/8, 9/10 of a phenomenal play on a couple of occasions, but just couldn't get it in here. And because you can't get the catch over Darius Phillips, and it's a great effort, I'm not saying that's a normal play, just couldn't quite do all the boxes, couldn't check all the boxes to make a spectacular play there. It ends up being a field goal on that drive for St. Louis instead. So you go to the second half. McFarland just rips this right up the seam. It was a different offensive line this week than what you saw in Week 10. Different at left tackle, different at right guard. But you just watch McFarland and the speed and the patience here. That kind of speed is honestly what got him drafted in the NFL and what kept him around for so long. You saw the mistake by Quinterio Cole coming up a little bit too early from his safety spot to try and give run support, and he gets walled off because he comes down the wrong lane. Just came up a little bit too early, and McFarland goes right past him. So those two explosive plays ended up being huge for McFarland and for this San Antonio team. It was ultimately those plays, I think, that decided the game, at least for my money. St. Louis comes back. They had a great drive, succeeding. Obviously, like you're seeing the way Sailors carried the football, and I thought McCarron did a great job getting them in this position, and sometimes just doing a great job as handing the ball off, right? Again, Hakeem Butler, the miss there. There are just a couple of times, and I don't think that was pass interference. It was just he slipped on the route. They stuffed Gallman in the backfield. I honestly thought, St. Louis had a big decision to make there, but they go for it. That's huge, man. Butler does things, and Wade Phillips said this to him, you belong in the NFL after the game. That is a catch that belongs in the NFL. There are a couple of guys who can make that catch, Ryan McDaniel made a catch like that last year for the Showboats. But that Butler does that so much, and that's part of what gets them the touchdown for Sutherland. They ruled it no good on the field, obviously overturned. But again, Butler, the one targeted, when you go back to the 2-point play, and Ja'Cory Peterson's not a quarterback, I know that. But if that ball's thrown just one step to the left of where it actually ends up in his hands, he's got time to tap that second toe, and he just didn't have it right there. And that's, that looms large in a game that's huge. This play, I don't know what, honestly, the honest problem was for San Antonio. Maybe that was addressed in the post game, and I didn't get the chance to hear it. But that can't happen. This does not seem like a very difficult read for Garbers. I know he's not necessarily involved in a lot of zone reads that way, but you're giving up an incredible amount there to try and run that play at this point in the game where St. Louis gets huge momentum. Damoy Peno picks it up, because nobody's able to fall on it, and they get the touchdown. 2 in the space of a minute, basically. That can leave you sore. But credit to San Antonio. They bounced back. I thought they did a great job. And, the biggest thing, honestly, was for this Brahmas defense, you come back and you get an opportunity for the Brahmas to score, and they got field goals, right? Ryan Santoso deserves credit for bouncing back from an 0-for-5 streak in the last couple of weeks. He's a guy who obviously wanted to get off the schneid, did so, and the juxtaposition of Santoso, who was 0-for-5, with Andre Schmidt, who is the most productive kicker in the whole league this year, and he misses a straight-on 50-yarder, whereas Santoso makes a pair of field goals late to kind of ice the game. San Antonio shows you as well. I think what we talked about with quarterback is true as well for kicker, where the difference between one UFL kicker and the next is not as wide as maybe one NFL caliber kicker and the next. And you can make the argument, I think, the NFL, has a couple of guys who are like legendary, and there are a lot of other guys who basically have just gotten hot at the right time and stayed true to the process. There are a lot of kickers out there who probably can kick and have kicked at the NFL level and just haven't been able to sustain that success or find the right situation. But for Santoso to bounce back this way and outdo Andre Schmidt in this game, huge for San Antonio. They got it done. Credit to them. I think Chase Garbers, when I saw him with Memphis in week 2, I thought he was actually one of the more precise guys in the league. I felt like they were well poised with him at quarterback. Dormady is a little more boom or bust, mobile, a little more excitement maybe, but Garbers typically makes the throws that are available to him, and sometimes it looks like he just made a good throw and the receiver made a great play after the throw, and part of that is playing quarterback, right? Not every team that you're on is, but I thought he did a solid job keeping the ball away from St. Louis in this contest, and importantly, getting a couple of those drives down in plus territory in the second half and not giving up opportunity they got there. Defense for San Antonio. What an incredible that Wade. Are we surprised? Are we really surprised? Wade Phillips was in a spot like this last year with the Houston Roughnecks. Got beat by Bob Stoops in the playoffs. But this time, comes around with the league's best defensive front. Comes up with, I think, 4 sacks in this game. They were after McCarron all day. McCarron was in a bad spot because he was hobbled. They rolled up on his ankle right before the halftime whistle. And, it was tough to watch at times because he did a lot, I think, in terms of trying to navigate the pocket on one wheel, essentially. But it was an incredible testament, I think, to what the defensive front did for San Antonio, to know that they really didn't have the services of Jordan Mosley in this game. You saw Darius Phillips a little bit there, didn't even record a stat. Devontae Beckett did have, I think, 5 tackles in this game and that forced fumble. But the guys that you were used to seeing make plays for the sort of like the back 7, if you will, for this San Antonio team this year, they were not necessarily like front and center in this game. They were missing A.J. Hende. They were missing Bo Pete Keys. And you got great games from the guys who replaced those guys at the back. I thought their secondary, given the chance to try and shut down Hakeem Butler, Darius Shepard, or Pearson, I thought they did a great job of that. Beckett obviously leading the charge, but you got a pretty huge play, I think, from Bryce Thompson at cornerback. A number of guys that maybe you didn't know were going to factor in huge there. I thought Corey Mayfield, Derek Langford dug their heels in a little bit when they had to, and made some plays. But ultimately, it's a team effort defensively. They did a great job. Aaron, they didn't even force a sort of a turnover. I guess you can say that's a forced fumble for Tavante Beckett. I'm not going to take his stats, but it wasn't as though they picked off McCarron, who's, by the way, very hard to intercept. But you just got some great play. Scott Nelson was the guy whose name I was thinking of, and I couldn't find it. He was terrific at the back, 7 tackles and a breakup. Tease Tabor, you saw recover that fumble. He was great for a guy who's been up and down. But Tabor again had the big pick a couple of weeks ago at the goal line to seal a game against Birmingham, and perhaps he's in that position again. But that defensive front, whether it's Patton, Romilly, or Jacob Sykes, we saw who was in there a little bit. Those guys have been tremendous. Garrett Nelson showed up. Tim Ward consistently in there a lot. And people don't appreciate the fact that San Antonio, not that everybody's not dealing with injuries, but San Antonio had their 2 defensive tackles, Jalen Dalton, Teron Vincent, both go on IR late in the season. And I don't know that there's anybody who's more critical to lose, outside of a quarterback, than like 2 run stuffers or like just sort of pluggers in the middle, right? Like those 2 guys have been massively effective, in pushing the pocket, tackles for loss, sacks throughout the season, and to lose those guys late and to have Amelie step in along with Patton, buoyed by Sykes, buoyed by Garrett Nelson and Wyatt Ray on the outside. I thought that was tremendous, those guys to step into that place, and you saw that they have an identity. The identity is speed. They got to the places they needed to get to. That helped them be better than St. Louis on that particular day. So that's up a really juicy matchup between Birmingham and San Antonio as a rematch from 2 weeks ago. San Antonio, of course, the only team to beat Birmingham. They snapped a 15-game winning streak for the Birmingham Stallions, and that was back in Week 9. Love to see the Brahmas. Believe it or not, I mean, if they win the league. They will have done it having gotten wins in their past couple of games, in 3 of their last 4 games against Birmingham, St. Louis, and then Birmingham again. And those matchups have been Birmingham, St. Louis, and then Birmingham to close the season. That would be huge for Wade Phillips' side. I don't think anybody would say they had an easy route. I wouldn't say that would be what people would say about them if that were the case. So I got to give a lot of credit there. And I'm pretty interested to see how this looks because John Lovett looked phenomenal carrying the football on Sunday. I think he and Anthony McFarland each went over 100 yards rushing. That's a huge credit to them, especially because neither one of them got to 20 carries. And Lovett was not available the first time that this team, the Brahmas team, played Birmingham back in Week 9. So I'm interested to see how he plays in the run game. I'm certainly interested to see how Matt Corral, if he is the one who's the starting quarterback, and if he plays the balance of the reps, gets in there and plays against San Antonio. They haven't really seen Corral can or can't do. A lot of people would say, well, it's similar. It's very similar to what Adrian Martinez. Yes, and no. I think Martinez is a little bit more powerful as a runner. That's not to say that Corral won't scramble. He does. Incredibly good in that second half against Birmingham Saturday. So I mean, if you're asking me for a preview of this game, I think again, as I think you could say for at least 3 of these 4 teams, this is defensive front supremacy week. Like that has been sort of the nature of the playoffs. Like Birmingham and Michigan both had the 2 best fronts in the USFL conference. I think San Antonio, and maybe you would put it on Houston, but in terms of outstanding defensive fronts, San Antonio and not Arlington, maybe DC. No, I think San Antonio kind of has a front that stands out above their divisions. we're going to get to see it here. So Garbus is going to have to do his normal, get the ball out quickly routine. Been quite capable of, as we've seen. We're going to see probably Corral in a similar fashion deliver the ball quickly. I'm interested to see is there somebody who can cover Jay Sternberger. That has been, I feel like, true for 3 years. Nobody can cover Jay Sternberger very effectively. That has been an incredible weapon. He has been an incredible weapon because of that. I'm especially with the banged up secondary. I recognize, St. Louis, Sutherland, like is a red zone threat, but Sternberger is a threat at any level on the field, and I'm interested to see with a banged up secondary how San Antonio plans on defending a guy like Jay Sternberger. They've got 3 good tacklers in Mosley and in Beckett. Gordon Williams and Darius Phillips has been great this year. Can any of the 4 of them individually stop Sternberger? Does it need to be by committee? What would you say if you're Will Reed, guys, as the battle plan for Sunday's Birmingham? It's going to be super interesting. Obviously, kicking game is going to be important. It'll be in a dome, exactly the same place as it was this week. San Antonio. I think Chris Blewett is a better kicker than Ryan Santoso. That goes to his track record. But again, I think Andre Schmidt was a better kicker than Ryan Santoso going into this weekend. How it turned out. So I'll be interested to see how the run game gets going for San Antonio. Obviously, the quarterback run is going to be something. How much? I don't really see the usage for a Ricky Person or a C.J. Marable that Anthony McFarland and John Lovett tend to get. At least they can get a lead. Obviously, those guys do get used out of the backfield. Something that really doesn't happen for John Lovett very often. It does happen for McFarland. But I think there, is as a wide receiver core, I honestly like San Antonio's better than Birmingham's. Outside of Jay Sternberger, I've not been incredibly impressed by John Canes, Kevin Austin's, Benjamin Victor's. They've not been like they make plays, but they're not. I've not seen them make plays and make something out of nothing the way guys on San. It'll be interesting to see. I think figuring out how to cover Sternberger is huge for San Antonio. Getting the run game going for San Antonio is also going to be them. And again, like it is most weeks, right? It's going to be explosive plays. It's going to be, how do you respond to turnovers? Can you win the battles? And what can you do in the red zone? Again, San Antonio has been rough in the red zone. They've been rough on PATs. They cannot get those points. They are closest to them, so to speak. It'd be a long day for Wade Phillips, but it's going to be a great matchup, no matter what. And we're just seeing it. Hopefully, a great game on Father's Day, and hopefully a lot of people tune in. Players can sign with an NFL team the day after that game is over. I'll be interested to see if anybody actually does pick up the phone, make a deal based on what they've seen in that game throughout the season. That's what a lot of these guys is that they should chance to potentially get themselves into a training camp and get themselves onto an NFL roster. Life-changing money. So we'll see what happens. But I'm very interested. I do think it'll be Corral. I do think get a chance to see a big game. I think we'll see a lot of targets for Jay Sternberger. Case in the matchup. How he is defended, I think, also comes to play in a big. And the Brahmas get the run game going. Lovett and McFarland. Really ask me to pick an MVP. Offense, defense. It's always hard. I would guess the MVP of this game, picking a defensive MVP, come from somebody on the defensive front, either outside linebackers or defensive linemen. Guys have been so great this year. San Antonio, not to say Birmingham's defensive front is any slouch. They've Carlos Davis there in the middle, but they've got a couple of different guys who will. And Jalen Twyman is now on the roster for San Antonio after waived early by Birmingham. That's an interesting. Offensively, I think quarterback is probably going to get the nod. Whichever one is better in this game, title game. I, you know, I'm really interested. I think Jontre Kirkland is incredibly talented. I would be really interested in what he can. People are pretty aware of his dynamic ability. High school quarterback can throw it, but I'm just interested to see how he gets covered in, because he had 5 catches. St. Louis, obviously Speedy Stevenson, I think, and Justin Smith by getting their touchdowns. Long one, but those are the guys, right? Like those are Garber's completing 15 passes in that game. 14 of them go to those 3 guys. Who to cover. Birmingham's a little more of a spread it out crew. Those 3 guys have got to step up for San Antonio. See how the secondary holds up. Birmingham, I thought they did making Danny Etling fallible, so to speak, right? He gave up the 1 touchdown to CLC Mariner, but the other guys, I don't think catches. Be interesting to see the offensive MVP ends up. I think certainly be up there in guys that would probably get the first pick in that award. I will be. Will be Stevenson on returns. Well, has not run against. Person and Merrill love those guys. I guess maybe biased, but I saw this weekend Marlin and from John Lovett. I like that room. Likely, if there's an offensive MVP back, come from anywhere. We'll see. I'm really psyched up about it and looking forward to coverage of the game this week. Hopefully bringing you another recap of it backside next week. If you like this, if you like talking spring football and football in general, I'm going to try and do more of this on this channel going forward this month, throughout the summer and into the fall. And I like bringing this to you guys, so please subscribe so that you get the little ding when I'm about to put up a video. And hopefully it'll be fun for us to talk to each other about it. Interested to hear your ideas. An email if you want. The email address is in the comments. And feel free to comment. Get at me on Twitter as well. Typhoon Spring. Until next time, do your best. Get some rest. I will too. So will the Stallions and the Brahmas. They're going to meet in the UFL title game on Father's Day, and it should be a fun one. Thanks for watching.